Good morning or good afternoon to everyone, depending on where you're joining us from. We still have a few people logging in, so we're going to give them a minute or two to settle, and then we'll get underway. Okay, I think we are ready to go. Thank you for joining us today for the webinar presented to you by IFMA EMEA and Nuvolo on delivering the X Factor. And no, we're not talking about a talent show, but we're going to dive into why workplace experience and tech matters. I am Lara Pamen, Managing Director of IFMA EMEA, and I will be your host and moderator today. We have attendees from all over the world today, so feel free to indicate in the chat where you're dialing in from. Now, before I introduce our 4 speakers, I would like to cover a few housekeeping topics. Please keep yourself on mute during the webinar. And today's webinar is being recorded. We will be able to share a link with you after the event is complete. And we welcome you to revisit the content yourself and share it with colleagues. We also invite your comments and questions. Please look at the Q&A chat box on your screen. If you think of a question for the speakers at any point, just type it in there and I will either pose it to our speakers at the time or hold it for the discussion portion at the end of the event. And I see we have some guests from the Netherlands, from Mexico, from already different places in the world. Now, regarding our topic today, we can start by saying we know that trends in the world of work are driving changes to physical surroundings of space, systems, and tools, and cultural standards. The workplace has changed. Whether it's hybrid or not, today's leaders have a lot to consider when making the office a place employees want to be in. I am joined today by some top-notch experts on the topic, and I'm sure it will be a very lively discussion. Let me start by welcoming you, Kate Lister, for who it's a very early morning. Hi, Kate. Please present yourself to the audience.
Hi there, glad to be here. I've been helping organizations imagine, deploy, and measure results of hybrid and flexible work strategies for nearly 2 decades now. And for most of that time, it's sort of like been pushing the rock uphill. And for the last 2 or 3 years, it's kind of been chasing me down the other side. So looking forward to a good conversation today.
Well, welcome, Kate. And then I'm happy to introduce to you Simon Blanquer. Welcome, Simon.
Hello and welcome, and thank you very much for inviting me to this panel. I am going to try and keep us all honest. As a technologist, I'm keen that I'm not branded by being that tech guy. I'm very keen to dispel that myth, and it is all about measurable outcomes and objectives, and technology is a part to play in that, along with people and process and all those sorts of good things, but very keen that the focus should be on what are we trying to achieve and how can the right technology help us get there.
Happy to have you on the panel, Simon. Paolo Rizar is our 3rd expert. Welcome, Paolo.
Hello. I'd like to add on to what Simon introduced there. I'm also a technology professional, but I'm not strictly speaking on terms of the technology, especially as it relates to the workspace. There's definitely going to be a bend of how technology is used in the workspace, but more importantly, how it's being used to attract people to coming back to the workspace. So looking forward to the discussion and providing some insights that I've learned along the way, in addition to contributing to everybody else's expertise.
We look forward to that. And last but not least, we have Oliver Richwell from Nuvolo joining us today. Hi, Ollie.
Hi there. Thanks again for inviting me to the panel. So yeah, my name's Oliver Ridgewell from Nuvolo. I'm Regional Vice President for EMEA. We are a technology company, so I'm glad to hear there will be some discussion about technology on the panel today, but also very much keen to see how technology fits in. You know, it's a piece of the puzzle. It's not the answer, and how you leverage technology, how you make that fit your business, and the outputs and outcomes that you require is really the key to any discussion around workplace, I think.
Excellent, thank you, Ollie. And indeed, there's the workplace experience consists of many different layers. Let me start by asking the first question: what workplace experience is, and why is it so important, and where are we now? Paolo, could you give your insights on that?
Sure, absolutely. I feel like the measurement has significantly changed. Ultimately, the effect of the pandemic has taught us is that people are very comfortable working from home, and we've been able to prove that we've been able to be productive working from home. So by that measure, if you are going to measure your productivity and your ability of your output based on how comfortable you are in the surroundings that are around you, I think that that's a new measure that we have to start looking at and reviewing and ensuring that we're able to facilitate that same emotion at the corporate office level to compare it against your home level. The idea being that we don't want people to feel that you can only be productive in one setting. So the workplace experience is really about introducing new comfort and new amenity that allow you to feel productive and be productive no matter the context at which you're in, whether you're working remotely from home or whether you're coming into an office. Just that the office is probably going to have different amenities to be able to provide you that you typically wouldn't find at home, but still add a greater amount of value to your productivity.
Mm-hmm. And what are the new goals for an organization when it comes to workplace?
Definitely stepping away from the cube farm mentality. Whereas when you come to the corporate office space, I think everyone has been used to, the seating arrangement is typically in line with, I call it the cube farm, but it's the static seating locations across the offices. I feel that dynamic has definitely changed because it doesn't offer that quick collaboration in the moment. And bringing people together isn't necessarily confined to just going to a conference room. So coming up with the amenities that definitely bring teams closer together without the need of having to constantly exchange the physical location of where someone is at, whether you're in a conference room or whether you're talking with your peers or colleagues in your work area. Making that more comfortable, making that more seamless is definitely an effect that we're seeing in that exchange of information and people collaborating with each other.
Obviously, the pandemic has influenced the way that we work and where we work a lot. Simon, what do these people expect, in your opinion, from the workplace post-pandemic? And how should the workplace support them?
Well, I've been musing on that question for a while, and I'm not entirely sure it's changed from what it was. I think the pandemic shone a spotlight and really illuminated that what people had before perhaps wasn't great, and the pandemic caused everyone to stop and take stock. And what they want now is what they wanted before, which is they want the choice to work where they want to work. I don't necessarily think there are two places of work. I think there are a number. It really depends on what each person or persona is doing. So I think choice is incredibly important, giving people that flexibility, not only to satisfy all of the stakeholders in their working world, but also being cognizant of their own obligations, their home life and obligations, to ensure that work-life balance is managed and maintained.
Mm-hmm. And you refer to choices and personality. Obviously, we have different types of people working for organizations, people who are more introvert, people who are more extrovert. How does that relate to the work environment, according to you? How do we need to support them, and what's your opinion on this?
So with every question I ask myself, I end up asking myself more questions. So if one were to start with the motivation of what's going to get people back into the office, and that is to get people to interact at a human level, and if we are all humans, are all using these spaces, but recognize that we're not all the same, and some of us want to interact in a cafe with a coffee with music going on in the background, and some want quiet spaces, whereas other people want to be an open plan office so they can have those anecdotal chats or can hear things through osmosis just by people being sat around them, and other people want to be sat in cubes. So I think there's a base level of we need to have X number of certain space types in our office. But conversely, we also have to recognize that those need to be funded, and organizations struggle with cost challenges all the time. So it is that right balance of providing the right categories of space in the office whilst not breaking the bank in delivering those.
Exactly. Because at the end, obviously, we want to still achieve a situation where we support the people and the staff working, whether that's in the office or anywhere else, where we offer them spaces that support them in the best way possible to achieve the strategic goals of an organization. And it's finding that right balance between creating certain types of spaces that are within a certain budget to achieve those strategic goals and objectives, obviously. Kate, how can we improve the workplace experience, in your opinion? How do we know what employees want? And should we ask them what kind of workplace experience they desire? Or do you have some good workplace experience examples to share? What do we need to do to improve that experience?
Yeah, I mean, there's the old story about Henry Ford. If he asked what people needed, they would have said faster horses. So yes, we need to ask them, certainly, but we don't just come out and say, hey, what do you need to make the office work for you? It's more about digging in and understanding what's the kind of work that they're going to be doing in an office. Why do they want to come there? And making sure that they have what they need when they get there. So a lot of the chatter now is, we want to come to the office because we want to be social. We want to see our colleagues. But when they get there, their colleagues aren't there. That's not going to work in the long run. And I think people are even more attuned to their personal needs now. We've sat in the comfort of home for a couple of years. And I've noticed myself that when you go out into a crowd or into an office, everything sounds louder, and it's just exaggerated all the things that bothered us before. So yes, we have to ask them, but we also have to understand the work they're doing. Are they doing heads down work? Are they sitting in meetings? How many people are they sitting with? How many people are going to be remote in those meetings? How many are going to be on site? That workplace experience is not now limited to the workplace. It's sort of the work ecosystem. And we actually needed to think of it that way even before the pandemic, because whether you're 9 floors, 9 miles, or 9 time zones away, people were already working remotely. So some of it, I think, comes down to asking them. Some of it comes down to observation. Some of it comes down to measurement. And my dream, my hope is that we begin to use science and not gut feel about the spaces, the kinds of spaces that we need to support the people that are in them. To your point earlier, all different kinds of people of cultural backgrounds, age, neurodiversity, all of that. There really isn't a one size fits all. And if we want people to be their best, we've got to find a way to support individuals as well as teams.
Absolutely. I like the expression that I've heard several times now, as work is an activity and not a place anymore, where we used to go to work, which was a physical place and a physical setting, and now it's just work as an activity, and you can do it in obviously multiple places, depending on the core of your activity. Do you have some good workplace experience examples, and how can we measure those? Because I think obviously we can implement all types of workplaces, but how do we measure what we do is successful or not?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you've hit my sweet spot there. I started out my career as a banker, and so I'm always sort of into the, okay, show me, prove it to me. And it starts with, what is it that you're trying to achieve in the workspace or in the workplace strategy? Right now, a lot of attention is on attracting and retaining talent. So did your change, did the space, did whatever the practice is, change that? I mean, offer to acceptance ratio, Glassdoor ratings, net promoter score, voluntary turnover, exit interviews, number of applicants per job post, those kinds of things. If what you're trying to do is increase innovation, it's a little bit harder to measure, but use the science to unpack what the precursors are to innovation. Weak ties and strong ties. One of the things we've seen during the pandemic is that strong ties got stronger, the people you know close, and weak ties got weaker, the people that you sort of know on the fringe. And so we need to use technologies and other methods to try to increase those strong ties, whether you're or weak ties, whether you're in the office or out of the office. We also know from innovation that the more people you interact with and the greater diversity in the thought pool, the greater the innovation will be. So how many people do you know outside of your group? How many people do you know outside of your discipline?
Right.
How many people did you meet this week? Measuring the trust and the feelings of safety, because we know that those are things that are necessary for innovation. And yeah, I mean, we want to measure the real estate too, but not in the old ways that we did, not in, square foot per person. It just didn't mean anything. What do we want the space to do? And so, did it perform? We built this new space. Did we want people to collaborate more? Okay. Did they collaborate more? We built these big open offices because we thought people would, talk to each other more. And as it turned out, when we measured the email activity, they were actually going more to email and chat than they were face to face. So, really measuring how it performs. And I think technology is coming a long way to helping us do that, and being able to look across the disciplines of HR, IT, real estate, and get those data pools to talk to one another. We're really getting better at that. And I think that's going to be really key in the future. Absolutely.
And that brings me right to Ollie, actually, because during the pandemic, we've seen obviously that technology has been a huge enabler of hybrid working. From your experience, how is technology redefining workplace experience?
Yes, it's a great question. I think every single one of us adopted a new technology, at least one or two, if not many, through the pandemic. And whether it was Zoom or Teams or whatever that you didn't use before, we all did a quiz at some point, I'm sure, that on one of these new technologies. But I think what the pandemic really did was just amplify use of certain applications. And if we look at workplace technology rather than the sort of broad spectrum, businesses had booking systems before, but there was suddenly a massive push to have booking systems to help people return to the office. Then as people started to return, it was more, okay, well, how do we use space planning technology to help us understand how we lay out the office, how we adjust to the amount of people who are coming in, or reallocation of desks and what have you. That then started bleeding into how do we use these tools and the detail we've got about the space to redesign the office, maybe help boost the collaboration spaces that were just sort of being referred to there. But in that sort of early stage, probably as we really started to just open up, those were the focus. It was very kind of tactical solutions and not sort of strategic. And what I always think is that if you're using these types of technology, they're there to gather data, measure information, understand how things are being used so that you can make strategic decisions about what you're going to need going forward. But one of the things that was maybe missed initially was understanding what people want. And I don't mean, like you already mentioned, I don't simply mean ask people what they want in their office. What I mean is, what's their reason for coming to the office? And there's a lot of people that you speak to, and particularly the extroverts. Oh, I want to collaborate. I want a big collaboration space. But there's a lot of other reasons that people come to the office. Some people need to separate work and home. Some people go to the office for quiet because there's a big family at home, or a small uncomfortable place to work. Whatever your reason to go probably needs to be understood to make sure that the right type of space is being offered. And particularly as we go into the winter months here in the UK, there's been a lot of talk about people wanting to go back to the office so they don't have to have their heating on at home. And even some of the pubs in the UK are now promoting work from the pubs so that you can use the pub's heating. So there's loads of different things that are going on, but I think understanding the reason that people want to go to the office or why they might come to the office gives you an understanding of what they need, and therefore how to leverage that technology to deliver for the business and for the individuals.
Mm-hmm.
Ollie, if I could just add to that, all good points, but one of the things I worry is that we're moving too much toward that collaboration space. When you ask people what they want, what would bring them back to the office, they say more private space. And
extroverts are the ones who want the collaboration space. And
exactly. Well, even the extroverts, you go to the office to meet with people, you're not going to meet with them all day long. You still need some private space. So I think we really have to understand that and understand the cultures and the personalities involved.
And from a technology perspective, that private space is often where you need more of the hard technology. I mean, we've spoken previously about being able to hook screens onto your laptop screen, or I sit here, I've got multiple screens and monitors around me. But when I go to the office, I actually use the WeWorks around London a fair amount. And if I get there and I'm just on the one screen all day, I know I'm less productive. So that for me makes me just want to go home after the meeting. But I go to the office to sit with my colleagues and learn from them and talk with them, but I still need to do the work that I was going to do anyway. So the hardware in terms of the technology is as important as some of this kind of more workplace planning type tools that I referred to.
I hear obviously that measuring and gathering data is essential, and I think it's also important to make your case towards the C-suite. If you want to have a conversation about how can we improve workplace experience and what we should do, you need to have that data available, obviously, to make the right strategic choices, right? I think that's something that we all agreed upon. Now, in a Delphi study that IFMA recently did, which was called the Experts Assessment, that was sent out during the summer to about 400 workplace experts around the world, we really got some interesting results back on the question about what the primary purpose of the office would be in 2030. Now, I must remember you that these are answers given by workplace experts, so not by users or office owners. So that might be a different angle here. But it was surprising that 28% said that the office would be about corporate identity and culture. 23% responded it will be a place for innovation and complex problem solving, and 22% said it was about social connectivity and networking. Now, this is a question for all of you. What is your idea of the primary role of the workplace in the future? And I'll start with Kate.
I took the survey.
I know.
but I'm not sure I agree with it all. The findings that you just mentioned, the corporate identity, one of the things that organizations are worrying about right now is that the loss of the sense of culture. But if you look to the science, if you look to the research, Gartner just did a study that showed the culture issue was a problem before the pandemic. And it's really not about place, it's about people. And so, I'm not sure if that's what we're going to be doing there. Innovation and complex problem solving, I think certainly on the complex problem solving, but again, the research shows that you can be, in fact, innovative anywhere, individually or in teams, and that it's a two-part process, that to be innovative, you also have to have creativity, and we're more creative when we're alone, driving the car, in the shower, where all the great ideas come from. And then we're best vetting those creative ideas in groups. So it's a two-part process, and I think we still have to learn a lot of what works for people. And of course, one size isn't going to fit all. So if I had to wager a guess, it's going to be more of the collaborative side. I mean, duh, and less of the individual side of work. But beyond that, I think we still have a lot to learn.
I agree with that comment that we still have a lot to learn there. It's such a hard thing to answer with that far enough runway to figure out like where any organization is going to go to. And there was a couple of great points that were brought up about the fact that I think people have an assumption that everybody knows what people want in the first place. A great question about do we ask people about what kind of workplace experience do they want? Well, people will give you a lot of ideas of what they want. I think the reality of it is what can we truly deliver is really the constraint. What people want. There were a couple of points that Ali brought up as far as the amenities side of things, of what people are looking for. Like if you're going to go work at a bar because they're going to give you heat, but the same type of concept are what people come to us with. Are would we consider putting a bar in the office? And while that may seem like very impractical and not something that we would want to consider, we are asking the question behind the question, which is, well, what are people really motivated by to come back to the office? So that has so many contexts, that has so many different needs to fulfill, that the real challenge becomes on what we can deliver. What can we really effectively provide that hits the mark at that 80 to 90% rule, that we're able to satisfy a broad audience with a great amount of amenity that kind of hits most of those points. And that could evolve. I do feel like the collaboration is kind of the workplace of the future of where people are going. But that there's a huge caveat there that collaboration means different things to different audiences, different business lines, different departments. And the culture part of it is incredibly important because I do agree with that statement that the culture is the people, not the workplace. The workplace can provide the comfort of bringing the people together, but in of itself, it's not going to drive the culture. I believe that like in our situation and very similar situations, and at least in the finance sector, most everybody looks to our peers, our company peers, as to what are they doing. And of course, all we're doing is looking at each other saying, well, what are you doing? Well, I don't know. What are you doing? We're kind of looking to each other to see who's going to make the move in making that huge leap into something so innovative that it makes the news and it makes everyone feel like, wow, that they're kind of like the Googles of the planet or the Facebooks or the Metas of the planet, when the reality of it is that's not exactly who we want to be, but we also don't want to be so front and center and put a stake in the ground and say that this is how it's going to be, that it makes it so definitive that we know what we're doing in defining what that workplace is. The answer is we don't know, no one else knows. We're navigating the culture to help us understand what that workplace experience should be.
Mm-hmm. It's a great point that you're raising there. I was at the conference yesterday in Italy where people were talking about facility management in the new normal. And one of the first remarks that I made was, what is the new normal? Does anybody know what the new normal is? It's changing constantly. So it's something that cannot be said, oh, this is now the new normal. It depends on so many factors, and it's obviously, as I said, constantly evolving. So there's no one size fits all new normal. Simon, any thoughts on the future of the workplace?
Plenty, thanks.
Do you have like 2 hours?
Yeah, exactly. So what I find interesting when you look at real estate stock, which is ultimately the built environment, which we apparently crave to come back into within our hybrid world. We can't get away from the built environment, whether it be home, whether it be the pub, or whether it be the office. But ultimately, they need to deliver upon the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, namely, there needs to be warmth, and Ollie's called that out already. So the physiological needs, they need to be safe environments. So we need to have our engineering ensure that those spaces are safe. We need to feel a sense of belonging and esteem, which will come through from the collaboration. Then obviously the self-actualization, which is really the ultimate goal, which is how can we facilitate people to be truly creative, productive, but whilst also getting the balance right. So you've heard, I'm sure, the use of the word metaverse, which is ironic because we're now talking about putting people back into a virtual world rather than the real world. So I think there will be this constant push-pull between physical and virtual realities. But underlining all of this, what we cannot forget is the ethical and sustainable building stock that this will all need. And there's no getting away from the fact that a lot of the office stock at the moment is perhaps not up to grade A standard, meaning it's consuming too much, and the materials and how they're made is has still produced a lot of CO2 that needs to come out of the world. But ultimately, we're providing, or trying to provide, diverse, ethical, and inclusive environments, really to allow all of our people to be productive. So you have this paradigm of all these things pulling in different directions, not all pulling in the right direction, and it's making sure that there is a balance, that no one thing perhaps pulls at the expense of the others.
Yeah.
If I can just add to that, I mean, Maslow, I use a lot of those same examples, but you've got to get that base right. And the biggest complaints about workspace are heating and cooling, lighting, noise, clean bathrooms, and good coffee. I mean, let's just start there. I mean, let's just get those.
Not even getting that right at the moment. So,
I mean, in terms of the 80-20, we've known for years people don't want sliding boards, at foosball tables. They want to be warm enough, and they've gotten used to being able to set their own temperatures at home. I think we could do a lot just to fix the fundamentals before we move on to more complicated stuff.
There's your 2030 goal.
I can tell you, so I was in Milan yesterday. Having good coffee was #1 priority there. So
yeah, right. Yeah, I said early on in the pandemic that I'd be happy if out of this we came out with a solution for having to touch the handle on the bathroom door.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is my workplace. I'm here the majority of the time, but I do go to, like I mentioned, I use the WeWork spaces fairly often, and I'm around at client sites, and you do get a different viewpoint from those. When I'm in the WeWork space, I do crave that quiet sometimes. Sometimes it's just difficult to find a seat with a plug, let alone somewhere that's quiet with 2 screens and so on. So I think that the workplace, we've got to get those baselines right. And to the points of some of the other members on the panel, I do think a big driver for the workplace is that social interaction. I think people want to come in and not just collaborate. There's as much about just being able to socialize with the people who they work with as much as actually collaborate with them, truly get to know who's there, because that's what helps to build the culture of the business. I know that you can have the culture and that you can still have a culture within the organization, even if it's remote. There's many businesses that do a lot of their work remote, but getting together really helps you trust the individuals who you work with and get to know them better and interact. I don't think the workplace set the buildings and everything set the culture. I think they define the brand. And that to some degree has an influence on the culture. But to my mind, the primary role of the workplace in the future is I think you mentioned complex problem solving, but bringing people together for for the social aspects. Those are some of the key elements. But what you've got to do is make sure that the fundamentals of the building, and I see this speaking to some of our clients, is the coffee machine's got to be working, the toilets have got to be clean, everything that Kate just said. All of those things have to be there before you can start really worrying about, well, how are we making the space suitable for the different types of individual that we have come in, not just the types of role. Because if you do everything to the role, whilst quite often people, their top personality type takes them to a type of role, that's not always the case. And some people need the office as much as others need to work from home.
Right, right. What about the role of the leadership teams? Because obviously, certain types of workplaces require different types of leadership teams. Is that evolving as well? And what type of leaders do we need or will we need in the future? Kate, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I think we've needed different leadership for a long time now. Again, the pandemic didn't create the need for change. It revealed it in a lot of ways. And one of the things that it revealed was the reliance on presence as a measure of productivity. And so one of the things that leaders really need to push down their hierarchy is learning to measure by results. Setting goals, that we've known this from Maslow and for years. Set the goals, give them the resources they need to meet those goals, and then get out of the way. And the leader becomes more of a coach than actually a leader. And quite frankly, I think that the role of facilities management and commercial real estate is one of, and of leadership in general, is one of getting all the stuff that makes people unproductive and unhappy out of the way. So, not having multiple screens when you're working in the office or at home, waiting 15 minutes for the elevator, bad bosses, bad behaviors, lack of training, all of those things. Get that stuff out of the way that keeps people from doing their best. And then again, focus on outcomes. And in terms of what a leader needs to be, empathy and a beacon of the organization's purpose. They just have to galvanize the organization around what are we trying to achieve here? What are we trying to do? And what is your role in that?
Mm-hmm. Paula, I know that you have just done a workplace experience and a workplace project. What's your experience with that and from a management perspective?
Well, I absolutely love some of the context that was just given right now, and the fact that the leadership evolution was already occurring, and it was definitely in need of changing. But in that context as well, when someone comes to leadership and says, "What are we going to do about the way that we spend money for new offices? If we're still considering to expand, if we're still considering to revamp workplaces, those are very large expenses to consider." So from that perspective, leadership has to definitely look at those expenses as a way to unite, as a way to bring back together, without giving this feeling or this emotion that it's a mandate that you have to come back, because we do want to provide that flexibility, but it still comes at a cost, which is the bottom line. What is the cost of bringing people back together? So one of the larger projects that we undertook is opening a new office that we're going to unveil at some point next year, early next year. And that was not just a considerable investment, but it's also the perspective of what are we putting in that new office that is going to make such a significant change to the way that we've done office design, the way that we've done office amenity and the like, by taking in a lot of the feedback that we've collected throughout pandemic, basically from our leadership team, to find out what will really not just entice people, but what would really enthuse people, what would really make people feel like we really put the thought into this new concept of the new office. And there's a lot of points that were brought up earlier that are very, very valid about the fact that fundamentally, the office in of itself hasn't really changed. Even if you put all the new amenities in, it's still a place to bring people together. And I absolutely love the commentary about clean bathrooms and having the temperature regulated and ensuring that you have great coffee. Those are all qualities that yes, people look for, but that's not the only reason they're going to come back for it either. It's not the banner that we want to advertise and say that leadership has said we have clean bathrooms, great temperature regulation, and you can pour yourself a great cup of coffee, come back in. It's really going to be about how much thought leadership has put into bringing people back together. So putting that idea forward is really the challenge that leadership has had to really think through, that we're not saying we don't want to give the impression that we're saying come back to the office for the sake of coming back to the office. Come back to the office because we are willing to provide an investment to make you feel comfortable about the way that you will collaborate with others. And Simon also brought up some fantastic points that we did. I'm grateful to hear, because I'm glad we put it into account, where the fact that there is no singular approach to the type of workspace that is going to be created. There are private workspaces, there are collaborative workspaces, there are communal workspaces, and then there are business production workspaces. And all of them have different contexts. And yes, all of them need to live within the same office. So I'm grateful to hear that from the JLL perspective, because it absolutely is true. The combination of all of those things is what constitutes the totality of the workplace that we're offering back to our employees. So leadership is craving that advice, looking for those analytics. Kate, they're definitely looking at every single analysis that's out there on the market, so that they feel confident that they're stepping forward in an environment that they understand how to use first and foremost, before we make the assumption that it's the sole reason we're coming back is because we created it.
I'm just going to jump to a comment or a question that came from Rohit, who said, what about new people coming to the office? Or new employees, they need to come to the workplace to learn the processes, the culture, and the people. And people are leaving the organization if they don't get the right workplace. What's your opinion on that, Simon?
I think they're absolutely right. I joined JLL in the middle of the pandemic, and for the first 6 to 8 months, I didn't meet any of my colleagues in person. So when I finally got the opportunity to do so, I was hugely relieved. But then, of course, we get into the cadence and the bell curve of occupancy of when people come in and what day will you be in. And if you're in on a Thursday, okay, well, I'll come in on a Thursday then. Well, you're not coming in on a Thursday. Well, I won't bother coming in then. And it can be something as simple as that, is what motivates people to come in. And it's ultimately the people. Yes, we'd like it to be a wonderful space and it must be warm and all these sorts of things, but people make a place. And if we don't get that right, and if we don't foster the right environment, the right culture, the right people in that environment, and it comes back to the previous point about leadership, is why hire someone? Why are you hiring that person? It's because they do the thing you need them to do to reach your goal, because you don't have the skill sets to do it. So everyone has a need to be at the table, so to speak. And no one person is more important than anyone else, because otherwise, why were they hired in the first place? It was interesting. I went on a vested learning course about 18, 19 months ago, and it was how to embark on a sustainable contract. And sustainability is something I've written down on my sheet of paper here, is that if whatever we do is not sustainable, whether it be buildings, whether it be culture, whether it be workplace balance, then one of those legs will fall and we'll tumble off the back of it. And getting that right, that sustainability right, is so important, and only amplified by what you see in British politics right now.
We were going to talk about politics.
Yeah, I would lean in on what you were saying there, Simon, in the link back to what's the role of leadership is to make the decision that isn't looking just at the now, It's trying to understand that this is, particularly if you're making investments in real estate or redeveloping or whatever your action or output might be, is you need to build something, or you need to create a culture, or you need to have something that you're not just looking at the short term. Because if you get it wrong, we've seen over the last couple of years, we got quiet quitting, we had the big resignation. People are willing to move if they're not finding that their workplace is conducive to the way that they want to live. And I think that's been a bigger change in the dynamic. I don't think I know anyone in my friendship group who I would class as kind of like a lifer. They're not planning on being in the business for 40 years. So people, if they're willing to make shorter, sharper changes, they'll do so when something isn't fitting far more quickly. They won't sort of sit through it for a 10 or 15 year period and then decide that a change is due. So if you're investing, people are a huge cost to have for a business. And they're also the first thing that gets, that feels the pain when a business is going through a hard time. So, but when business is going well, you need to make sure that, and even through a hard time, maybe more so through a hard time, you need to make sure that the tools, the facilities, everything that you're putting in place as part of the overall workplace is conducive to the individuals that are there helping you to make your business successful. That's the role of leadership, is, in my opinion, making sure that the tools and the facilities are there, not just in the near term, but the long term.
And talk about. Sorry, go ahead.
I'd like to offer an alternative view to Rohit's comment. Well, it's a pet peeve of mine that people say, we need to replicate the water cooler. We need to, onboard in person. Well, who said the water cooler was the best way to collaborate to begin with? In fact, it's not. There's science to show it. And let's not talk about onboarding. 60% of people quit in the first 2 years, and half of them quit in the first 6 months. So let's not replicate processes that were broken to begin with. There were organizations all over the world that have been very successful at operating 100% virtually. So what are the lessons that we can take from them? And, maybe there is a place, and certainly there is a place for that kind of ambient learning of an office. But consider that some companies are getting along without it. And so what can we learn from that and how they do it? One of the things they do, for example, is they get people together maybe twice a year, or they get them together in teams regionally, because it doesn't take, it's like, oh, I miss my colleagues. Well, once I'm with them for about an hour, I don't miss them anymore. So it doesn't take, full-time face-to-face to build those trust bonds. And I think companies like Salesforce that are building facilities that are sort of designed just for that kind of more than onboarding, but getting people together. I think that we're going to see a lot more of that in the future.
Mm-hmm. I think working remotely certainly brings along a lot of challenges. And I want to go back to Ollie quickly. As Nuvolo, from the technology side, do you think that technology will continue to drive and enable the workplace experience? And do you see any future and potential applications for example, IoT sensors and IWMS software?
Yeah, I mean, yes is the short answer. Technology, you'd hope I'd say that for sure. Technology will certainly continue to enable workplace experience, and like I mentioned, there's a broad array of what technology means, from your virtual meeting to the metaverse to the screens that you've got on your desk. And so technology is critical to the way that we to the way that we work and operate these days. And I think it would be an enormous struggle for us all to get by without that. But specifically regards to IWMS, IoT, I think these tools are allowing businesses to collect the data that's necessary to inform the decisions. And that's crucial to understand whether you're operating an environment where you need to really look after your real estate, whether that's maintaining the coffee machine, making sure people have got the right type of space for the work that they're doing, or the type of individual that they are. All of that can be supported through things like an IWMS, but you also need to make sure that if you are largely virtual, that you're providing the technology and solutions that allow the individuals to do the jobs away from the office, wherever they may be, because many of us are in global businesses, and we interact with people on multiple continents every day, pretty much. So we need to ensure the technology supports that for sure.
Absolutely. Well, we have 10 minutes left, and I would like to get some questions from the people who registered and who are attending. Maybe one question from Erin. It seems that facilities as workplace management is really leaning towards soft services. All the high level roles, however, focus more so on portfolio planning and site overseeing. Will there be a switch for senior roles to act more like HR and focus on the soft side?
I'm happy to sort of do a very short answer and then let others chime in just from what I've seen. So I engage in my role with facilities managers, lease administrators, capital program managers, all these different types of roles who are often looking for software to help them deliver those capabilities. I've seen in quite a few businesses that I work with that the facilities discipline has either started to be merged or even sometimes report in through the HR discipline. So that to me is a big change that helps to adjust where that function is viewed within the organization. So hopefully that sort of helps to almost answer your question with a yes, I do think it's changing.
I'd like to add a little something to that as well, because something that I see the industry shifting from is a schedule to demand-based. And that demand-based is how do you manage a workforce now? When you've shifted from we're going to send person A out to do task A, B, and C every other month without fail on that day or near about. And now we're going to change that. We're going to throw all these balls up in the air and say, actually, we're only going to maintain something or fix something when condition or whatever states that we should. Because if I park my car on my drive, do I need to take it down for an annual service if I've not moved it more than 10 miles in a year? Well, maybe not. Maybe I can push that service interval 2 years or 3 years without much detriment, other than the English weather making it rust. But you get the idea, is that changes the service model that is there to support the real estate, because all of a sudden you're taking away the cyclical routine of, right, we need X number of people to do X number of tasks, to what we're now doing is because people are coming into the office, we need more services, more soft services, more people, more HR, more headcount, more resource, but only when we need it. And then when we don't need it, what do we do then? So there's an interesting challenge that the industry is yet to truly embrace.
Kate's point about how many people touch the bathroom door quite often was, and I've seen a couple of our customers are going more to the model of, okay, well, rather than clean the bathroom like once a day or twice a day, let's have it on 50 door opens or 100 door opens, something like that. So
yeah, exactly.
I think also to add to that, just because this will be music to Kate's ears, is the measurement has definitely changed because of what we're trying to measure, and moving away from this SLA-based approach of the traditional. We used to measure how fast we could do something for you, how fast we could deliver something for you, or those kind of metrics don't resonate anymore. We're really talking about workplace experience, customer experience. So measuring experience is very different than measuring the SLA. So from just I delivered the widget in X amount of time, that's nowhere near as valuable as how did it make you feel that I delivered that widget to the location at where you are at, which could be anywhere. So I feel that though that measurement definitely is shifting, has shifted, will continue to shift to measuring different metrics around the success of how people feel the services are being delivered to them, which has that effect of, are we taking on more soft services from a facilities level or even from a technical service delivery? Absolutely. But that's because we're now playing a slightly different role, if not substantially different in some organizations. If you've not had that effect or element within that facilities management, service delivery management, or those other spaces, people are yearning for more of that connection. And so that means that the people who are providing the services have to provide that connection. And that might not have been in that organization's wheelhouse once upon a time.
Excellent. We're 5 minutes out. I will end with one last question to all of you, and I will try to encourage you to keep it short. What is the one thing you would advise employers and building owners to take into account to make sure that they offer the right workplace experience for the users of the workplace? I'll start with you, Simon.
Goodness me. Caught me off guard there. Well, I think as not want to rehash everything we've said is what is the right experience, and I think where we're landing on that is not everyone's the same. I think there are two things to be factored in here. There is the strategic objective of the business, and as Kate has already said, not everyone wants the physical experience as a business mandate. Some are very happy with the virtual. And then there are the people. What do the people want? So if you are going to offer up either a virtual or a physical experience, then what are those optimum experiences? Coming back to the Maslow hierarchy of needs, we need to very much analyze that and then consider how that fits into the overall strategy within the overall budget.
Thank you. Paolo.
I would say that it definitely comes down to how do they feel, and this is employers and or the workplace, is the most effective way to make revenue. I think it fundamentally comes down to how are we making money, and if the process is supported by a workplace, or the process is supported fundamentally by being together, then the answer is right there, and I think that helps drive that case better for an employer, for a building, to say that this is more effective because you can tie it to that value. If people can see that value and understand it, then it becomes very, very clear that that's the only way to operate effectively. But making that story, connecting those data points are critically important.
Thank you. Ollie.
Yeah, I think I'd say that the piece of advice is make sure that they're data-driven decisions. I mean, there's been a few times on this call where I think Kate particularly has said, well, people talk about the water cooler moment, but that's not actually in the science. That would say that that's not the best way to collaborate. So don't make the decisions just because you have that feeling, or that it's even often said in the marketplace, oh, everyone misses the water cooler, but that's not necessarily why you should try and return to the office. It's about making the decisions that are right for your business and your type of work, which leans into what Paolo just said, which is how do we make money? So you've got to align, what's the best workspace, but make it data driven.
Clear. Kate.
Everything they said.
And more.
But interesting, I had a call with someone recently, and she admitted to me that she didn't know what a water cooler was. There was all this conversation about, the water cooler. She'd never seen one. It was just completely foreign to her. So, let's not forget that the new generation has different expectations. But I guess the one word I would add to all of that is agility. There's not going to be a one-off solution, a one-time solution. There's not going to be a workplace that lasts 10 years. Or even 5 years, perhaps. It's really going to be about being able to read the needs of the people, of the environment. We're going to have another pandemic. We're going to have climate issues, and we've just got to learn to be agile in how we think about and how we design these things.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. So I think this was a very, very interesting discussion. We learned a lot about that it's not about the buildings or the workplace, but about the people, that we need to try to make data-driven decisions, that we need leaders that are coaches more than managers, that we need to measure what we do in different levels, and definitely that there's not a one-stop solution for that works for everybody. I would like to thank my panelists today for today's webinar: Kate Lister, Simon Blankiron, Paula Rizar, and Oliver Ridgewell. Thank you for sharing your insights and expertise. If you have any additional questions or would like to connect directly with IFMA EMEA, Nuvolo, Global Workplace Analytics, JLL, or William Blair, feel free to reach out directly using the contact information on this slide, or you can reach out via Twitter or LinkedIn. Thank you for your time and have a wonderful rest of your day. Goodbye.